Hello, everyone. Welcome to Campfire Talk. This is where we sit around the fire with our feet up and a cold drink and let the conversation flow. Tom was with us finally after getting through his situation with his illness, and Adam's with us today. So, Tom, this is your first Campfire Talk, so have you go ahead and start things off.
Okay. Well, I think maybe an appropriate place to start off for my first Campfire Talk would be my first experience with the creatures. And
Sure.
This was back in December 14th of 2017. I had gone up to an area here in Oregon that I called a buddy of mine. I said, come on, man, we got to get a Christmas tree. And I don't know if you guys know what a noble fir is, but it's a very nice, easy tree to cut, and you don't have to do any trimming or anything. It's a great Christmas tree. So I suggested one area. Oddly enough, the area that I originally suggested is the one that we have done our expeditions at, you, me, and Adam, and all that. And the guy goes, nah, we're not going to do that. We're going to go to this other place. So long story short, we go up and we get the tree and work our way down. And it's getting dark. We just worked our way down below the snow line out in the Willamette National Forest. And the direction that this sound came from, the only way to get there is to travel through 40 miles of wilderness. So there's nobody there. So we have one little flashlight that we're sharing between us.
That sounds familiar.
Working that good. Yes, it was actually a headlamp.
It's the obligatory light that never works correctly.
Oh, I'm telling you. And
you boys were well prepared, huh?
Yeah, I wasn't thinking Bigfoot at all. I was thinking strictly, I want to get this tree. I want to get home. I'm cold. I've been climbing under my truck. I'm getting the chains, and so I was fixated on being cold and getting out of there. And so I had my set of chains, and then you got to move the truck forward. And, my buddy's digging out his chains with the headlamp, and I'm stuffing them in the bag. And I had watched just enough of these I'm not going to use that word, just these shows that, talk about tree knocks and stuff like that. I thought, oh, what the heck? I picked up a piece of stick and I went whack, whack on a tree. And nothing's going to happen because it's not gonna, right? And so I put my chains away. 2 to 3 minutes later, literally as loud as a car horn, about 10, 15 yards away behind this old growth Doug fir, comes this sharp whistle, like when you put your fingers to, go like that. And we're like, my buddy goes, what was that? And it I don't recall exactly, but it may have been phrased a bit differently.
You saying it rhymes with truck?
Yeah, it could. It may have, yes. And
here's was the tree loaded by this point in time or what?
Well, and what caught me was the tone of voice. It can be kind of contagious with somebody's, fear can be contagious. And that's exactly where this was. And I was like, that's exactly right. There is nobody here, 30, 40 feet from us making this loud whistle as loud as a car horn.
Hey, Tom.
So, yeah.
Just describing the cold and being tired makes me look ever more fondly at the artificial tree that we have, let alone whistling.
Oh, I'm telling you, man. It's an experience going out. It was $5. You pay the Forest Service $5. I think they jacked it up to $6 now, but
Scoundrels.
You cut, yeah, scoundrels.
I just want to know, are you still going in the woods to get your trees?
I do. I love it.
Tom, leave the ones that are snapped off, up high alone.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because
but they're easier to decorate.
They're
easier to decorate, Will.
Very true.
They lean over
You could put the angel or star on much easier. That's right.
You can. But there actually was one you brought yeah, it brings back some memories. When we came down, I saw one of those trees and I thought, there's this guy named William Jevning that I bought one of his books and I've listened to him, and he had talked about these snapped trees, and I made a mental note of that. It's like, look at that. Here was this tree about 3 inches in diameter, about 8 foot up, and it was snapped over about 150 degrees. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And that was probably about 1.5 miles from where we heard the whistle.
Imagine that.
So, yeah. And we went there in July. But anyway, so that was kind of, for a couple of weeks, I really puzzled over what could make a whistle sound like that. I grew up on my grandparents' farm part of the time. We had roosting animals. I'm telling you, roosting animals do not make a sound when they're roosting. They're quiet. They keep it that way. They stay alive longer. So I got a hold of David Boozer, and he got me in touch with you. David Boozer, for those who don't know, ran a Bigfoot website for a while and developed Will's.
He's a web developer.
Yeah, he's a web developer. So anyway, Will, you got a hold of me and you said, sure, we can talk about that. He said, would you like to come on the show and discuss it? And I was thinking, well, no, not really. I just wanted
He said,
answers.
oh, hell no.
Yeah, I was like,
No,
but I thought, if that's the price I got to pay, I guess I'll do it. And that was my, and you made an interesting comment on the show. You said those night whistles was one of the more common experiences that even the Native Americans had described. They call them night whistlers. So, and I've been back to the area since. Found the tree. We found footprints, and that's kicked the whole thing off.
all started with the obligatory wood knock.
Well, I don't know what to tell you about that. My theory, and that's all it is, it's conjecture, is there's a couple of guys who are, messing around, getting chains out from under the truck. And I go knock, knock, and that's more of an organic sound. I don't know. I have no idea. Was there a cause and effect? 2 knocks. That's it.
2 knocks, and so, maybe that's knock, knock, and the who's there?
Who's there?
And so he whistles. That's him saying who's there. That's what that was.
That's exactly what that was, precisely. And
saying, well, boys, come on over.
Yeah.
The next one was, we're getting the heck out. But what really caught me was my buddy. Now, he was a school teacher, retired school teacher, but he had run Forest Service crews in the summertime in that particular area, doing brush clearing. He'd been doing it for years. He's very familiar with it. And, there's nothing to be afraid of up there. And his response really was the trigger for me to get a hold of Will, because I was like, like I said, it was very contagious. It did not make sense. I couldn't. What made such a loud? It was a sharp whistle, about as loud as a car horn. There's nobody else up there. We were on those old Forest Service roads, those fire access roads. Well, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They're not paved. There's gravel, ruts.
Well, if it's not another person,
we've been there.
Yeah, if it's not another person, it kind of narrows your options down.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah, Adam got broke in up there.
Chuck, do you get whistling in Oklahoma?
Yes, sir. Sure do.
Wow. Have you ever heard whistle yourself?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Well, here's something that's interesting. A gentleman that we're going to talk to here in the future, very shortly, said that he was told on no uncertain terms, you do not whistle at nighttime, ever. He's a Native American, and he said,
and
you just don't do it.
We've heard that from other sources, other Native sources as well. Do not whistle at night, because it'll bring them in. And let's
do that next time we go out there with a camera, for crying out loud.
And I know, saying it on this show. Is there somebody going to go out there and try that? Well, if you're on the missing persons list, it's your own fault.
Yeah, don't blame us. We warned you.
Fair enough. I got to run a little faster than one of you guys. That's all.
I haven't had any whistling in Texas.
No whistling in Texas. Gotcha.
No whistling in Texas.
Wow.
You asked me if I've heard that before, and I'll tell you a little story real quick if you guys want to listen to it.
Sure.
Yeah. We went down to a place called Brown Springs. It's on the Oklahoma-Texas borders, right where the Red River runs through there, and we've been down there quite a few times. And
it's spooky. It's real spooky. Tell them that, Chuck.
It is a place that has a history of pretty bad mojo. There's an old cemetery up on top of the hill above where the Brown Spring comes up out of the ground. And there's a cemetery up there on the hill. And these tombstones are so old, you can't see any names on there. You can't see the dates or anything about the person that's buried there. That's how old these tombstones are.
Wow.
And the history has it that back in the day, people from Oklahoma would cross there going into Texas, and vice versa. Texas would come across to Oklahoma in that area. And there was a Native American tribe there that was pretty rough and killed a bunch of people coming in and out of across where this crossing was. So it's got some bad mojo. And back in I think it was the late 70s or early 80s, there was a guy and a girl that were just parking out there, and they didn't come home, and they sent cops out looking for them, and they found the car at this place and found 2 dead bodies that were pretty much mutilated. And there's a lot of speculation as to what actually got a hold of them. Some people will say it was a Bigfoot. Some people say it was a dog man. So I don't know. Anyway, we've done research down there quite a bit, and we were actually there was quite a few of us there, and we split up into 2 groups, and some of the guys went one way, and some of them were with me, and we were actually walking down the old river channel where the river used to run. And we're walking down there, and it's still daylight, still got a little bit of sun left. And we're walking down through there, and I'm in the lead, and all of a sudden I see this tree structure. And I stopped everybody and I said, "Hey," I said, "up here about 40 or 50 yards from us, there's a structure there." I said, "Let's be real quiet and let's get in this area and see what we can find." Well, we walk up to this structure, and I get within probably 20, 30 yards from this structure, and I pull out my I have a Canon EOS camera that's got a 300 millimeter zoom lens, and I got down on my knee and zoomed in to the structure itself. And this structure, the best way to describe it is it looked like a igloo made out of sticks and brush. It was round like an igloo. I mean, it was very cool. I've never seen anything like that before out in the woods. I mean, I've seen a lot of structures, but nothing like that. And I was facing the opening of this structure. And when I got my camera out and the zoom lens, sorry about the dog barking. He's antsy.
He's got things to
anyway,
say.
Yeah, he does.
Says, dang it, I will be heard.
Adds flavor.
Yeah. So there was an opening. I was facing the opening, and by this time, the guys had kind of circled around me, and we're all looking at it. And I took a picture of it. You couldn't see anything on the inside. It was really dark in there. And so I took a picture, and when I did, my flash hit. And when my flash hit, I caught two eyes at the opening. And I told the guys, I said, hey, there's something in here. Let's surround this thing and see if something comes out, we'll know what it is or whatever. We thought it could be a wild hog. It could be a coyote den or something like that. We didn't know. But probably 10 yards from us or 20 yards from us, all of a sudden, we start hearing limbs breaking. And then we started hearing whistles. So we were getting limbs broken off, and we were getting whistling going on. And there was probably 5 or 6 of us that were in this one particular group. And one of the guys had a thermal imager, and he pulled the thermal out and turned the thermal on. And we actually caught a heat signature that was laying on the ground looking out at us. And it never came out. But we had these branches breaking. We had the whistling going on. We heard foot stomps. They were stomping on the ground. And by that time, we kind of figured out, hey, we're in a situation that we shouldn't be in. And we all had walkie-talkies, and I called the other group and I said, hey, you guys got to get over here. There's something over here in this structure that we found. So they come walking over there, and there was a guy that used to research out there quite a bit. His name's D. Doss. I don't know if you guys are familiar with D or not, but D had his group of guys, and so they come over where we were at. And D had this habit of every time he would go into the woods, he would whistle the same tune over and over. And when D got up there with his guys, and so there was quite a few people that was looking at the thermals as all this was taking place. And so there was multiple people that actually saw the thermal image. And what we began to think was that there was a juvenile in there. And because Mom and Daddy wasn't happy. And when D walked up to the structure, he started whistling that tune, whatever tune it was. I'm not really sure what it was. But anyway, he whistled this tune, and immediately, everything stopped. There was no breaks. There was no stomping. There was no whistling. It just got real quiet. So what we did then is D actually walked up to the door, or what looked like a door on this structure, but didn't see anything. So the way this structure was built, it was actually built on the side of a great big sand dune. And D walked up on top of where the sand dune was to try to peek down in there to see what was in there. Well, when he did that, he said he saw something crawl in to the side of the structure and dug itself into this hole and then covered it back up to where you couldn't see it anymore. And in fact, we actually lost it on the thermal imager. It just vanished. And
wow.
And that goes back to, I've talked to Native Americans before who call Bigfoot, they call it the brother of the beaver. And, I don't really know what that means, but that whole structure thing looked like a beaver's structure. I mean, it was round like an igloo, but it had the branches were all bent around in a big dome looking thing. And on top of the mound, that there was actually evergreens laid on top of it to, I guess, keep the moisture out of it. But the funny thing is, the very next day, we went on the Texas side because we had heard that there was some accounts back in there. And so we went to this area, and we were walking through reeds and leaves and stuff that were probably 10 to 12 feet. They were above us. We had to actually use machetes to get into this place. And we were walking down what looked like a pig trail. And we get to this point, and lo and behold, there's another structure like the one that we found on the Oklahoma side. But this one was on the Texas side, and we looked, there was nothing in it, but we looked at it and looked inside of it, and you could tell something had been laying there, but it wasn't there at the time. And that whole area is just a really unique area. And like I said, it's known for bad mojo and bad history there, but it is definitely a good place to do some research. And
the whole whistling thing made me think of a situation. Oh gosh, it must have been 1990, 91. I was with a group of friends who were up on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State on the eastern side, and one of my friend's wife, her father had a sighting up there, elk hunting one year. So we hiked several miles into an area called the Buckhorn Wilderness, and we were in kind of a big bowl, sort of a large depression, or maybe there was just ridges all the way around it. It kind of looked like a giant bowl we were in. And we started hearing whistling, and it's exactly like you described, Tom, with, you put your fingers in your mouth and you whistle really loud, right? And then we heard this a bunch of times, and from 2 or 3 different directions around us. And somebody says, and I said, well, what the heck is that? Because that time I wasn't really familiar with, the natives talking about these things whistling. I'd read it in Green's books, but didn't really, at that time, wasn't really thinking about that. We were just hiking up there. And it was not very far away. It was sharp and it was loud, these whistles. And somebody in the group says, oh, that's a marmot. Well, I could see the marmots. They'd come out of their holes and they'd stand up and look around when this whistling would go on, but they never made a sound. And you can go on YouTube and other places and hear recordings of marmots. They don't sound like that at all. And
they have a chirp.
Yeah, chirp, right. So I didn't. I was still kind of thinking, no, I'm seeing the marmots. They're not making any noises. They're on high alert at whatever's making this noise. So I figured, later, many years later, I thought, well, maybe the creatures were there. They probably stayed out of sight because we were there, and there were probably 6 or 7 of us in the group, and but they were probably hunting the marmots. But that's the only.
That's kind of spooky though,
yeah,
especially Chuck crawling around in there. They could drag you in there, and that'd be it. You'd be done.
The burrito,
it's funny you
hotel.
mentioned that. The burrito hotel. Well, that first excursion, okay, the one I just talked about, when we first went up there, there's a huge area that it's just a natural rock slide formation. You got these giant boulders. It's just a huge boulder field, 45-degree slope angle, maybe not quite that. And when we drove up there, I saw this black fluffy tail. It was a fox, I'm sure it was. But it was a black fox with a white tip on it, and just dove into into the boulders there. It was funny because I went to the ranger station sometime later, and I was like, what the heck? That's a Bigfoot. We don't have black foxes in Oregon. Well, apparently we do. But when I went in there and I talked to the rangers, or whoever the that biologist and stuff behind the counter, and I said, hey, do you have anybody here who's familiar with wildlife biology? And I mentioned the location, and there's about 5 to 7 people there, and it was perceptible that immediately they pretended to continue to work, but all ears were perked up. Everybody started listening. And then I said, hey, I saw this, and I described what it was. I saw what looked like a black foxtail. And there is just this sort of communal sigh of relief. They're like, oh, and they went back to work.
But they must have known what the whistle was too then, or at least had some inclination to it.
Oh, they did, because I'd asked this one of the gals there, because I had to go in there and buy maps. She used to be able to get the USGS maps for $7. So I got to know her pretty well, and I told her, I said, hey, I encountered, they had a little brochure on the wall, just informative thing on Bigfoot. And I said, I ran into one of those things there last year. And it's like I slapped her in the face. She got silent. She goes, oh, up there? She goes, yeah, there's a lot of them. Now she's on duty telling me this.
I'll bet you a lot of people are out like hiking or doing whatever in the outdoors and would hear a whistle like what we're talking about and not think twice about it, thinking it was another person.
Right.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, there's somebody whistling.
Okay. What I'm curious about, Tom, is, and Will, y'all had these experiences up there with park rangers. Why do you think that they are told not to talk about Bigfoot, or
well,
do you think they're afraid of talking about
Tom
it?
And Adam,
that they have knowledge of it.
Tom and Adam, you guys know when we went the few times to those ranger stations, they all, I think it was pretty obvious they didn't know anything about it. They were interested, but they didn't know anything.
And I think they were milking us for information.
Probably.
Because the one ranger station that I just mentioned, I actually talked to apparently there's one ranger who runs the station, and everybody else is under that ranger. And I told her about it, and we were on the phone for 45 minutes.
Now I will say
she was fascinated.
Right.
What's that?
I will say one thing. Remember the one Forest Service person we talked to, and I won't give too much information because they don't want their identity mentioned, but this person had a sighting, and mentioned that their co-workers were all concerned about these things and for their own safety. It wasn't like they had I don't believe there was a ton of information they had, but apparently it was something that was definitely on their minds.
I have yet to go into one of these ranger stations and talk to them and have them, discount. Oh, no, they don't exist. They, to a T, they've all said, well, I actually work behind a counter. I don't go out into the forest, but my coworkers do. And to a T, not a one of them gets a warm, fuzzy feeling with these things.
And there's an author I know who wrote a book called Where Bigfoot Walks, The Dark Divide. And it's about an area just to the east of Mount St. Helens. They call it the Dark Divide. It's kind of between Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams. But in there, Bob Pyle, and I know Bob, he mentions in there that there was I can't remember what his position was. It was Forest Service supervisor of some kind, just off the top of my head. But he was the one that had to approve logging contracts on Forest Service land. And he made it very plain that if any loggers ever uttered the word Bigfoot, they would never get a contract again. They called the guy Bull of the Woods. That was his nickname.
That's interesting. Why? And we can speculate till the cows come home what the reason is behind that. But,
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting,
Yeah. Well, and these two different ranger stations that I've talked to, I go in there and I get to chatting, and one of them, she goes, "Oh yeah, our guys run into them," and they get really serious. The tone and the demeanor changes instantly. Well, of course they're going to run into them. They're in an area where they're out in the woods all the time. Yeah, it's an opportunity.
Well, the Mr. Black interview, which is it all out now, Will, or just pieces of it, or?
Well, he recorded 2 hours with us, and what I sent you guys, the transcript was about 1/3 of it. It's 10 pages. And I still need to go back through and make sure that everything is word for word so I can get you guys the rest of it. And everybody, we're working on it, getting it read. So have patience.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's and then he's still going to record more with us. So we're trying to get this first couple hours done, and then we'll move on to recording more with him.
But it's the kind of stuff where you go ahead, Adam.
I'm sorry. The point that he brought up in the piece of the transcript that I have was that in his day, which was, I forget, 80s, 90s back and then, maybe 70s, but I'm pretty sure. Anyway, in his day, if you were in the military and you made an official report of any kind of encounter with these things, you could risk everything. You could risk your career. You could risk all sorts of things. You had to be informal about how you let that information out. You could certainly tell your superiors, but you by no means could go on the record.
Oh no!
and say anything.
In the unit I was in at Fort Lewis, and told you guys about the encounter my squad and I had. It was sort of an encounter. I mean, I couldn't really see it clearly, but we could certainly hear something on two legs walking around us. And I had 15 men that would all attest to that. But,
you were dropped into the area.
Yeah, we were dropped. Right? We were dropped there by helicopter, and they left us there overnight. And it wasn't something that I would have thought about telling, any of the officers in the unit, our commander or anything. I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
that's the same thing when my husband was in the Air Force, and you didn't talk about UFOs either. So, you could risk everything if you actually wanted to file an official report on something like that.
I don't know in the Army when I was in if anybody would have filed anything like that. I mean, I think from my experience, if you were to tell a superior, if one of the guys would have come and told me, had I not known anything about this, I would have said, yeah, you're seeing things. That would have been kind of the typical response. It would have been, you would have blown it off. One of the sergeants would have said, it's baloney. And that's all the further it would have gone. And I think even if you'd gone to a commander, some officer, you might have got a little more polite response, but it would have been the same result.
Well, did they ever have any accounts of park rangers disappearing up there?
I don't know. I know I saw an account at Mount Rainier where the ranger didn't disappear, but apparently there was a series of sightings or something on one side of Mount Rainier. And on our old family friend Charlie, he worked for the Park Service in the late 50s, early 60s. And he told me a story one time. He said that and they were doing trail maintenance down in an area called Stevens Canyon. And I think to this day there's still no roads that go down there. I think they had some kind of a service road that went down there back in those days. But it was a long way down there. It's a big canyon. And he says, I saw the darndest thing. I saw this bear standing upright with a steelhead in its mouth. And I said, really? And then as he thought about it later, he said, that was no bear.
Wow.
Well, have y'all heard about the disappearances in the Angeles Forest down in California?
Adam?
Just in the last 2 weeks?
Tell me about it.
Your
That's
neck
my
of the woods.
neighborhood. I haven't heard about it.
Well, I just heard about it this afternoon. My daughter called me, and Michelle, she's gone crazy now. It's just like she's a crazy woman with this. After she had found the footprints, and I don't know if it has anything to do with Bigfoot, but they had 4 people that disappeared on Mount Baldy that they haven't found, and that was, I think, in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And then there's an actor that went into the Angeles Forest just to go for a day hike, and his name's Julian Sands. I don't know. I'll have to look him up because I don't know who he is, but y'all may know who he is. But she said if I saw his face that I'd know who he was. But his name's Julian Sands. He's been gone for over a week, and they can't find him.
You know, I think
really,
I think that's the area that Mount Baldy was, Adams, where Joe Rogan interviewed me. and I thought at the time, you know, this could be a place where they'd be. You probably wouldn't see a lot of them in that area, but who knows, right?
Oh,
well,
yeah. Well,
we had that guy. Go ahead, Adam.
Oh, okay. I can tell you this much. So the part of the Angeles Forest that I stomp around for the most part is when I say developed, I mean like there's campsites and there's you know, maintenance communities, if you will. There's like, you know, there are, I wouldn't say neighborhoods, you know, it's like 5 houses, right? You know, but and a little fire station and little things up there, but lots and lots of wilderness. But it's mostly kind of scrub brush. It's that kind of mesquite and things like that. Now there are copses on the hilltops of you get the ponderosa pine, and you get you do get the old growth up there. The medium growth has all been burned away. We had the station fire in 2009, and then 2 years ago we had another, back when California was burning down, you know, and it took out all the medium growth and the young growth, but the old growth is still there, and there is. Particularly, there's a very large forested area that, to my knowledge, has not been burned, and it's accessible to a very limited degree, and it's basically where Rock Canyon. There's a Rock Canyon campground, and there was a lot of activity in that area. It is adjacent to Devil's Punch Bowl, and of course, you know, we all know when an area has been named with devil in the title and it's out in the wilderness, ordinarily that implies that, you know, our fuzzy friends have been there.
We actually have an interesting connection to that area, by the way. Tom, you remember we had Paul on, who grew up in the same area that Tony did. And Burbank isn't really, it's that far from where you get out to that area. And that's where. Oh
no, it's not. Yeah, it's at the base of the foothills.
Yeah, well, apparently one of these things had come right into that area. This was back in the 70s, wasn't it, Tom?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah, and chased them.
Yeah.
There was a lot of activity reported in the 70s. Yeah, definitely.
Well,
so it came down the wash or that kind of thing.
Yeah, it.
I don't remember what episode that was, unfortunately, but it was a really good interview. He had some really interesting. In fact, didn't it? It did something to his bike, which was reminiscent to the story that TW has told us
in Texas. It bent the bike, and that's one of those Schwinn. You know those. Remember those?
Yeah, we all had
those,
Schwinns.
Yeah, with the handlebar. Yep. Those are stout bikes. That was rolled steel. That wasn't the aluminum ones. Those are heavy duty bikes. But here in Oregon, we had who was the guy? There was an actor from Seinfeld who ended up similar situation. Now they did a recovery, but everything pointed to, well, he was found at the bottom of a ravine.
It was really strange. It was really strange.
Yeah, his pants had been removed, and
well, that's always never a good thing.
No. But he had been. They had eaten his soft tissue parts, and it was a bear. The bear did it. Bears get blamed for stuff they had nothing to do with. That's the bear, yeah.
You know, it's always the bears. Those poor bears get blamed for everything.
Well, they
can't defend themselves.
It's the fallback. It's the only thing people think could do something like it. It's the only thing out there. Well, they don't take into consideration there could be something else out there.
With hands.
I think we're all aware there's plenty of other things out there.
Yeah.
Well, we are.
That area I was describing on Rock Creek, the Rock Creek campground, and then Devil's Punch Bowl. And then if you look, basically the north face of the mountain range of the Angeles Forest, there's this gigantic forested area that you can't go into because it's just the face of the mountain, basically. And at the base of it, there's a California Corrections facility down there where they put the prisoners who they use for when fires break out. They bring those guys out so some of the prisoners trained to be firemen, if you will, and working for the county, and so they're in that facility. And so basically, hikers don't just go boogieing through the friggin' prison yard, and up the mountain. So it's protected. It's protected area.
In Skamania County, Washington, there was one of those. I don't know if it's still there or not, but it was when I first moved to Vancouver. We drove out in that area, and I started looking over that region. And back at that time, in the mid '80s, it was still pretty much, the timber wasn't cut. There weren't a ton of roads out there. There weren't a lot of people out there. And they had one of those. It was a minimum security facility. So, the guys could easily escape if they wanted to, but it was a hell of a long hike to get out to any place, and that area was full of Sasquatches. So they probably, if they tried to get away, not a good plan.
Bad plan. Very bad.
Very bad. I'm sure that wasn't in their mind when they put it out there, but, added bonus, I guess.
It's sort of the land equivalent of trying to escape from Alcatraz. Here you got great white sharks, and here you got Sasquatch.
Out in the middle of bloody nowhere.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, and I'm looking, apparently this Julian Sands, they still haven't found him. He's still missing.
Yeah, that's what Michelle said, that he'd been gone. I think she said a week now that he was missing.
Wow.
Well, Will, the area that, and Adam, the area that you and I were, the expedition area, it really takes the cake for missing people. And there's, there's a math professor from the U of O, just poof, gone. Dogs don't find him. SAR teams can't find him. Just boom. And,
hey Tom, when you had that great video of you talking about the missing people in the area, so I put it together, and then I'm like, well, let me look up what the current stats are, right? And this was me cutting this thing together back August, September, and that area.
Weren't there 13 people for August alone?
Yeah,
that was it. Yeah, there were 12 people that went missing in August alone.
That's crazy.
And
I'm not good at math, but that's a lot.
It's a lot, and there were at the time currently 156 at that time active cases of missing people in that area.
Do you know what time frame that covers, Adam?
Some of them were old, some of them were like 10 years old, but the majority of them, were much more current.
The interesting...
they were like within the last couple of years.
The interesting thing about that Angeles National Forest is it would be... Any investigation would be pretty hard-pressed to find evidence because it's so rocky there. From what I remember.
Ground doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ground's not good. I go to a few places where there's a creek, but then the creek dries up, and... and I've never found prints. I've never found prints up here. I've really never run into, the weirdest thing that I ran into going up there is one time I wasn't looking, but these creatures were on my radar, but I have that, I haven't seen one yet. And so I'm like, I'm probably never going to see, but
that's when you'll see one.
And, right when I blow it off. So I'm at Cloudburst Ridge, and it's like 7,000 feet, and it's just this wonderful, wonderful getaway up there. Except that, now it's covered with black soot. But anyway, before that, I was, and it's a ridge top around 7,000 feet, and there are boulders that stick up out of the dirt. They're not round sitting on the ground, but they're like, they're part of a greater piece of sandstone that's like down below, and granite sometimes. And I was up there, and I heard very distinctly like a heavy rock clacking on top of another heavy rock, and it sounded maybe 50 yards away, right? I was like, what the hell? And now I'm on a mountaintop, so I'm assuming that could have come from anywhere, but I kind of went in the direction where the sound came from, and I could not find rocks. I couldn't find anything that made sense. I mean, there were some large rocks behind me, but they were not in the direction where that audio came from.
Well, Adam, that's interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's just my mental impression was sort of like something was putting the lid back onto, or like they were closing the door, if you will. It was just kind of a clack. It was bizarre. It wasn't like, when you pick up a rock that, maybe basketball size or something, and it's heavy as heck, but
right.
you can pick it up and put it down, and the sound that makes. There was more to it. There was more to that, the click that I heard. But
okay, so the area that we were at the first time we went up there, we'll just call it where the brush piles were. Remember that?
Oh yeah, sure.
Skylar got a text.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah,
that was right.
My brother and I, he came out from the Midwest, and we were up there. Oh, I don't know. We were up there about 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and we heard that rock clacking from that same area, that same.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah, so it was very interesting. It was the same thing, and it was subtle. It was off towards, because if you follow that far enough, you hit like a 1,600-foot drop off.
Chuck and Forrest, the text that they were mentioning that Adam's son got, we were up in the middle of nowhere, and there was no cell service. So apparently something got in. So all of a sudden, real loud, we hear this, and it's, what is it, Mickey Mouse? Hello, adventurers.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh man,
it was funny.
Text notification.
It was funny.
Oh man,
that would kind of freak you out.
Yeah. Right, and nobody else has cell service. Skylar was the only one who had it. It was hilarious.
Yeah, and he looked, and after I'm like, you turned that off, right? And he goes, I didn't think I'd get cell service out here. It's like, oh man.
Well, remember you guys were talking about how quiet it was. We get up there and it's like, it should have been just that time of night. All the animals are, squirrels and stuff are chatting. Not a peep.
And Adam's got it on video, by the way.
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah. I'll send it to you guys. Yeah, it's just, oh my gosh, so crazy.
Well, Adam, the door closing is, the rock sound, that's bizarre.
It really is. It's really strange. And I wonder, part of the connection
goes to another dimension. Almost. It's just almost like, you know what I mean?
Well,
well, yeah, but
there are situations, when, like in John Keel's book, when he had his sighting, he saw the yetis, the two of them. It was interesting. Yeah. It wasn't, a sound like that, but it was in a big rocky area like that.
Right.
And I know of other situations that are kind of in similar circumstances.
Well, it could have even been, this is all speculation, but, and there's a million things it could have been that would be non-Sasquatch related. I don't want to just jump on hit the Sasquatch button with both hands, but it was loud enough to seem like it was very close to me as far as maybe 50 yards away, but
you think it could have been another person doing that?
Well, I don't think so. Unless they were on another ridge and sound did something funky that I don't know sound normally does. You know what I mean? It's for somewhere, maybe it's 7,000 feet, sound from far away sounds like it's right next to you. This kind of phenomena, just because I don't understand everything about sound. But remember Mr. Black, one of his comments was that the creatures, when it comes to wood knocks and whatnot, that those sounds were reported even in areas above the tree line when
there are no trees.
Where there are no trees, right? And he was saying that those creatures are making that audio with their mouths.
Exactly, it's tongue pops. It's not wood knocking; it's tongue pops.
And I wonder if maybe I heard, if it was a Sasquatch, maybe I heard more of a tongue pop. I mean, but there's rocks all
in
over
forest,
the place.
we've talked about that.
What it sounded like. Yeah. But also, there's a ridge just right where that audio was coming from, which goes straight down. And I know that's no problem for these things. And I did not go look down the ridge. I just went, honestly, I went looking around for people, because I've been up there and I found stacks of rocks, but they're little bitty things. I mean, obviously people did this. It was like a little rock with a slightly smaller rock on top and a slightly smaller rock on top. This
Right.
kind of like a little cairn or something. And I mean, I'm not about to think that's... my rule of thumb is if a human being could possibly do it, then that's what I'm going to ascribe.
And Tom and Adam, you guys remember we did a little test when we were in the field this past July, and Tom, your brother Dave, he wandered off a ways away, and I thought, just for the heck of it, let's see how far this sound carries, and took a big chunk of wood and smacked it against a tree a couple times. It didn't go that far.
Oh, yeah?
Dave wasn't that far away from us. You remember?
Yes.
Dave wasn't that far away,
Right.
and he didn't hear it.
And you know what was funny? Right. When we went up that road, Kurt and I heard, and Laura, I didn't think anything of it at first, but we heard a loud pop, followed by 5 other pops. So it was like there was 5 of us up there. It's like somebody did a pop.
Counting you.
And then they're counting, and they almost sounded like rifle shots, except it's just thick woods. Nobody's up there hunting.
Remember, Tom?
It's no rifle range, yeah.
Remember we recorded, I think her name was Brandy with Milo up near Fort Lewis, and she actually recorded that sound, and it sounds like rifle fire, but it was actually one of these things and whatever, because they didn't see
mechanism.
They didn't see the mechanism that was making the sound, but it was certainly not, something being a chunk of wood being slapped on a tree.
No. Oh, no. And well, what the group of us, what we experienced at 2:30 in the morning was not a chunk of wood. It was like a telephone pole.
That was something entirely different. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, that was bizarre.
You hear these stories about wood knocks, and I just think, no, that's, and it's not what native folks talk about either.
Right.
Yeah,
they got the whistles.
The whistles, yeah.
Yeah.
I've only heard the whistles a couple, 2, 3. The first one was just striking.
Yeah. Now, as long as you don't hear the whistle and then have it followed by "Come on over here, big boy" or something like that.
Right, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
No one. But
it's good thing. It's good thing we don't have TW
back to
on
that
here.
Area. Right.
I'm sorry, Tom.
No, it was a skidder road. I've gone back to the area because you want to know exactly where did this happen, and I found the exact. It was an old real Doug fir. 2 guys probably could not put their arms around that tree, and then it was it was a very, very steep incline. So I'm sure they used that skidder road to just run up and down.
Where you heard the whistling.
Yeah, where I heard the whistling.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, they're going to use the path of least resistance. So.
But here's the thing that's funny. The question I asked myself sometime later was, did we just happen to be at the right place at the right time? I think it might have been more like one of the tires on my truck was in a state of, shall we call it, deferred maintenance. And we're in the snow. So we're doing 5 to 7 miles an hour down these switchbacks.
Mm-hmm.
That would be nothing for one of these things. If it's curious to be following.
If you think about it, they're not something that just bumbles around the forest. They're an apex predator. They're very aware of everything that's going on in their environment. They have to be able to eat. So we are extremely noisy. We have a big footprint when we're out there in terms of light and sound and visibility. So they could probably hear us a mile away.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And they're going to come and look.
To me, it makes more sense that the things probably followed us. So if I ever do it again, I'm going to have 2 cheesy little flashlights.
I mean, Forrest and Chuck, what do you guys think?
Oh, you guys amaze me with never having flashlights. I was like, let me send you some spotlights from Texas.
That's us when we were teenagers. We had one. I don't even know who it belonged to, but it always seemed to make it on the trips we'd go out, and the flash and the batteries were only half good, maybe.
We're not happy in Texas if we don't have, unless we're equipped with one of those million power spotlights, you know.
Oh, I used to have one of those. I used to have one of those.
Well,
no, we've upgraded now. Yeah.
We stopped at Cabela's. We upgraded. Now we have, 1,200, 1,300 lumen floodlights now.
Yeah, these they're nice to have. And what do? We didn't use them.
God.
Well, okay.
Well, no, we used them last year. Sorry, 2 years ago. We used them in 2021. We didn't use them in 2022.
Well, the whole point is not you don't want to drive off anything out there.
Yeah.
You kind of want to keep a low profile. If you want them to do things, you need to keep a low profile.
Well, I remember when we went up there that the first time I went to Cabela's and I bought one of those Coleman 3,000 lumen lanterns. You put a propane thing under it, and I remember Will's like, no, turn that thing off.
Well, over the years I've had the most luck with being the lowest key situation. Where there wasn't any light, we didn't make any sound. You just sit and observe, which is, and first, that's how they teach you in anthropology. If you want to observe primates in the wild, you want to be as inconspicuous as possible.
So that's how Diana Fossey got her information on, gorillas and then Jane Goodall and chimpanzees. But then sometimes, as Jane Goodall can tell you, that can be a dangerous proposition. I'm not so sure that I would want to go out there, Will, and just sit quietly in the dark.
Well, we had a quick escape plan.
A Bigfoot maybe 6 feet away from me, or even closer. So it's bad enough looking at them through a pane of glass when they're only about maybe 1.5 feet from you, and and you realize that that's all you have between him and you. I mean, I can't even imagine being in a camper and realizing that it's just on the other side of the wall of the camper, because you realize the strength of those animals. That thing could have just busted that glass and jerked me through there like I was a rag doll.
I got to tell you, we had our escape plans, didn't we, fellows? And I know it pained Tom greatly, but for the good of the team, he was willing to leave his brother Dave, to save the rest of us.
Right.
I was just wondering who was going to trip who so that the others could get away.
What was interesting?
The two of them were at each other all the time. So I know it would pain you, Tom, to lose Dave.
Brothers, but here's what was interesting was I didn't realize that the spot, because we didn't know we were going to be in that location until like seconds before we just pulled in there. But we were right in the middle of this huge huckleberry patch. And apparently these things have a hankering for huckleberries. And I picked one. I was like, this is... Now, the ones that I'm familiar with are the dark purple ones. But this was, I guess it was another variety.
Yeah, the
red ones, yeah. They thought we were stealing their huckleberries, and they were maybe upset about it. I don't know.
They weren't aware that we were there. They were too far away. But you notice that's something, I told you guys about when we looked the following day, at those berry bushes. And I found areas in Skamania County where whole patches, I mean like 30 feet across, where, and I used to try things, experiment, see, well, how did they do this? So like on the bushes, you'd grab it low and then, kind of put your hand around it and squeeze a little bit and yank up. And it leaves the plant there with no leaves or most leaves gone. And you got a handful of berries and leaves, and you just stuff it in your mouth, right? If you were one of them. And you'd find these whole patches. That and black caps, they seem to really like those. And again, I would read up on these things, and I would go out in the spring when all these fresh shoots are coming up. And, you grab something and you shove it in your mouth and see if it tastes good. And surprisingly, a lot of those things did taste good.
Oh, there's nothing on planet Earth like those dark huckleberries. I mean, it's like, oh, first thing I had that. They look like blueberries, and that's where the similarity ends. But you had mentioned where keep an eye out where they just strip the whole leaf.
Strip the bush, yeah.
And Kurt and Laura and I went back about a week after that experience. And I didn't take pictures because, you're just out wandering around. But I saw a bunch of them. They just stripped leaves and everything.
Oh, everything. And you'll see lots of it.
Gorillas do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Do that, but they don't use their hands. They use they use their mouth. They just run it through their mouth.
Well,
you can see where it did that exactly.
Are you guys familiar with the William Rose story that was in John Green's book?
Didn't he view one doing that?
Right. It was sitting in a bunch of huckleberry bushes, coincidentally, and he pulled back a bush or whatever and saw the thing. It was sitting right there in front of him, and he said it was wrapping its lips around apparently leaves and berries, and it would strip them that way.
Oh, wow.
And it sounded just like a gorilla.
That's exactly the way a gorilla does it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It sounded exactly like that.
See, I find it fascinating when you have the evidence and then you have an eyewitness who said, yep, I saw him do that.
That's what they did. Corroborating information, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, listen,
it's
guys.
highly doubtful that individual was familiar with how gorillas eat well.
It wouldn't be. It would be something just a natural way to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that as an individual reporting that, they wouldn't have in their mind, well, I saw a gorilla. I mean, people don't, you're just not likely to have people see, a gorilla do something like that in the wild.
Right. And I think that was in the mid-1950s. So.
And then they report that they saw Bigfoot doing that. So it's not like something that they could, take from one individual species and transfer it onto another.
Right. I think that was in the I think it was 55, was that when his encounter was, I believe. Anyhow, it was at a time period when, there wasn't National Geographic showing things on TV a whole bunch where you would have seen that.
No. Well, you wouldn't have even seen it. Was National Geographic even out those days? I don't know.
I don't know, but it wouldn't have been on TV in those times anyway, so... very interesting. Well, listen, guys, we're just about out of time here, unfortunately. Very interesting talk. Great group.
But we were just getting wound up.
I know. Well, we'll just have to save it for next time. Adam, we're so glad that you were able to join us today.
Absolutely.
And you're always welcome to come on with us. Anybody have any last thoughts or anything they want to bring up before we call this a wrap?
Well, I'm just going to say that I like this format. It's fun, it's relaxed, it's enjoyable. This is my first one. And Will, this is just like the way you and I yak all the time. So the fact that we get to share this with our audience, I think is just fantastic.
Well, that's where remember Forrest and Chuck, we were talking one day after recording, and I think we were about an hour in, and Forrest says,
how many times did I tell you, shut up, Will, shut up, Will, shut up.
She's like, dang it, Will, you should be recording this.
Yes, punch the record button. Punch the record button. And he's going, huh? I said, people would enjoy hearing all this.
I'll tell you what would be fun if we get together this summer, if we do it again, and we have an actual campfire and we sit around and film
and do it on video.
Oh,
yeah.
Adam would catch us, with our pants down probably. So.
Got to do it on video. We got to go to the hottest hotspot we can find, and I tell you guys, I'm going to be whistling for part of that.
Well, make sure you bring Milo.
Tom, be sure to bring your brother Dave.
I'll bring Dave.
If Adam's going to whistle, we need to have Dave.
And we're going to have a basket of huckleberries. Absolutely.
Now, are you going to tell Dave?
Yeah.
Oh no! Let's bring it on.
Of huckleberries around his neck.
Oh,
there you go. That's it.
That's kind of like the ham.
Come at me.
All right, guys. With that, we'll call it a wrap. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.